Hello, everyone. This lecture will be concerning the topic of Common Core standards, which is a new topic that's come up recently in education in the United States, as well as its rippled effect into the state of Mississippi, which many of y'all will start to see. The Common Core standards, we're going to look at two sections of this. We're going to first off just look at an overview article, I'm going to go ahead and pop that up as a sharing right now. And that should be popping up now for you. And this is just a basic article on the Common Core standard and how it has just kind of changed our way of thinking. And then from that lecture, we'll spin out into more of we're going to look at the history of the Common Core standards and where did this really come from so that you can have a better understanding of this. One reason that I've added the Common Core lecture is because many of my students have started asking, what is this Common Core? Because I keep hearing about it in my teaching of every day, and especially in Mississippi. And it feels to me that this is kind of 2002, 2003, because when in 2003, everyone started talking about this No Child Left Behind is coming, and it had already been passed, and it was starting to get bigger and bigger, and everybody started saying it's coming, it's coming. So this kind of feels, and of course now it's here, and No Child Left Behind is in full function, and is sort of being phased out in some areas with the waivers that they've introduced. But with the core, it's kind of in that era now. So 2011 is kind of like 2003 for No Child Left Behind, as everyone is kind of saying, Common Core is coming, and by 2013, 2014, it will definitely be here across the board. So I kind of want to just give you a heads up on it so you'll understand it by looking at two sections of Common Core. One section will be just an overview, and then the second section will be a historical look at Common Core by examining this article that I'll pull up in a minute that is very comprehensive of it. This article says that tying together, and this article was written, I believe, in 2010. It talks about tying together the Common Core standards, and says after more than 20 years of messy thinking, mistakes, and misguided direction, policymakers have given teachers and students a solid set of standards in mathematics and literacy. The Common Core of standards only begins the process of moving academic performance in these subjects to the levels we need. So let's definitely try to note down what that means. What does it mean by levels that we need? And we'll address that shortly. And that's also, you're seeing that an increase in standards. That's another theme that we're seeing with that, is an increase in standards. The anticipated adoption of the Common Core by 48 states, only Texas and Alaska are not on board, also indicates genuine political will to move away from disparate standards across the country. Notice the phrase, the anticipated adoption, which means that maybe all the 48 have not adopted that yet. The bottom line, K through 12 public education is as close as it has ever been to saying every high school graduate must be college ready. So that answers the note we wanted to take before, where it says that the standards need to be at the level they want to be. So what does that mean? The level that they're wanting with these Common Core standards is the idea to have every high school graduate be college ready. So that is what Common Core standards goal is to have every student college ready when they graduate. Having a set of common standards also lays the groundwork for developing assessments aligned with those college-ready standards, and for developing teaching tools that are aligned with both the standards and the assessments. So you'll notice that keyword assessment there. The assessment should be tied to the Common Core standards. So what does that mean? Well, I don't want to give it away, but I'll go ahead. Assessments is tied to No Child Left Behind. So No Child Left Behind always argue for the need for better assessments. So the Common Core standards, by having uniform standards across the board, you can then have uniform assessments. So you're already a step ahead of me if you see that Common Core standards is a spin-off of No Child Left Behind, which it is. We need to have accountability. We need to have testing. Well, that's fine. So all the states devise your testing and how you want to do this. However, let's have uniform testing by having Common Core standards. And then the article then talks about how Bill Gates Foundation has been collecting evidence about and thinking through answers to these questions. Why should we allow people to be college ready? Why do we set that as such a lofty goal? Then the article says, first, we want readers to understand that we do not come to the issues as think tank experts. One of us is the education director of the foundation, talks about, and then it kind of says, we're not experts on this, however, just you need to listen to us. And it says, I like this quote right here, there were too many pieces change at the same time and never enough money and a lack of political stamina at all levels. The No Child Left Behind Act helped set priorities, but the prescriptive accountability measures made it difficult for some districts and states. So the Common Core standards is kind of a solution to the big idea of how do we fix education. So if you buy into the fact that education is broken and needs to be fixed, then you buy into the fact that No Child Left Behind is necessary and we need accountability. But No Child Left Behind doesn't fix everything. So with that, the Common Core standards is there to help people build their better curriculum. With the Common Core standards, many things now become possible because states will be working from the same core. We can create broad-based sharing of what works best. At the same time, provide local flexibility to decide how best to teach the core. The new standards also provide a platform for innovation, a structure that can support creative strategies for teach core content in mathematics and literacy. Let's look at some rationales on why Common Core is necessary. Some justifiably worry about Common Core standards. The Common Core standards, however, point state policymaking in the right direction without imposing rigid specifications about how states should use them. Analyze the standards, and you'll see a theme of fewer, clearer, and higher. So there's not that many standards. There's fewer. They're very clearly written, and they have a higher expectation for the students. They're designed to be more manageable for teachers and to focus on preparing students for college. So once again, we see that focus again on preparing students for college. The evidence for adopting college ready goal could not be stronger. So why is, and this next paragraph talks about why are we setting college ready as a goal for our students? Using the evidence, our college ready work team defines ready. So what does that ready mean? As access to 2-year transfer programs or 4-year colleges with the knowledge and skills to succeed in freshman courses. We're wanting our students to be able to go to a 2-year or 4-year college and have the skills to pass a freshman course. Those courses can include, Intro to Psych, English Comp, Lit, College Algebra, and basic science courses. So we're wanting students to be able to have the chance to succeed in college. This expectation is just as important for young people who enroll in occupational certificate programs after high school. Success in these programs and in on-job training requires the skills and knowledge embedded in the core standards. So they're trying to extend the umbrella with that statement, saying that Common Core will not only get people ready for college, but if students choose to do other vocational track jobs and life skill programs, then that would also help them as well. This is the Gates Foundation advocated for fewer, clearer, and higher standards because evidence supported the needs for students to have certain skills as they move into college, including, and here's the skills that they want, academic skills and content that are basic but also encompass big ideas, cognitive skills such as problem solving, collaboration, and academic risk taking, academic relationships such as being motivated and to do demanding work and being engaged in it, college knowledge or knowing how to apply for college successfully and navigate the system. And then it says that college knowledge is the title of a book by David Conley at the University of Oregon, who is analyzing college admission and freshman year requirement dates at College Ready Work Foundation. So it says what should happen next. The Common Core of standards takes the guesswork out of determining what students should know and be able to do. The Common Core, however, doesn't tell states what the standards look like in practice. So the Common Core does give the states the standards, but how they should implement them and how they should look is up to the states. Moreover, the Common Core will become useful to teachers and policymakers only when it's part of a larger system of next generation assessments that track how much students know and how well they know it. So, that's a nice, interesting sentence right there, that the Common Core movement will be part of a larger system of next generation assessments. So we're seeing kind of a race on two tracks. One track is the assessment system set up by No Child Left Behind, the accountability, and if you're in the state of Mississippi, that'd be the MCT, MCT2, which later became, and also the SATP. So those are the accountability movement that we set up. And now that we have the Common Core, our accountability testing can be more of a federal kind of system across the board. And then that's what they're talking about, that once the accountability system is set up, we can start shifting more towards a better accountability system because we'll have the Common Core set up. I know what some of y'all may be thinking, that this is kind of a movement to federalize our education. By having Common Core, you're kind of having federal curriculum, kind of, because it's encouraged by the federal government. And when you're having an assessment system that is supported by the federal government under No Child Left Behind that the states have adopted, you're kind of having a federal assessment system. That argument is valid because the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution says that the role of education is the state's responsibility. So with that, the states will always have responsibility of the education system, but the federal government is kind of encouraging through money to adopt some of these federal initiatives. Teachers would welcome state assessment systems that measure what they consider challenging classroom work and are technically valid. See, it says that's why the Gates Foundation overall strategy considers high-quality assessments a critical resource for teachers' effectiveness and teachers' capacities to prepare students for college-level work. This is an interesting paragraph. Most states own a single standardized assessment now used to measure student achievement as a central component to measuring teacher effectiveness, which is not ideal. So that's many times we look at the state test as our benchmark on how well a teacher is doing, and the Gates Foundation in this article says that that's not a good idea. States need to move their assessment system to higher levels as the race to the top guidelines specify. So let's put a note down. What does this race to the top mean? We're going to make sure we address that shortly. So what is race to the top? And of course, what is No Child Left Behind, which we've already talked about? And also, what is this Common Core we're addressing at this time? All these are connected, believe it or not, folks. By giving teachers examples of formative assessments aligned to college-ready core standards, states also need to build platforms for data that teachers can use to improve their instruction. So that's what we're seeing as we see this, is all of this seems to be connected. Common Core, many people mention No Child Left Behind and accountability when they talk about that, and now we're talking about race to the top. And it talks about what to expect in mathematics. The college-ready work investments. This is what the Gates Foundation is going to be providing with $354 million between 2010 and 2014. They're wanting to help set a framework that could be the foundation for a common proficiency conversation. Develop prototypes of both formative and summative assessments in math and literacy. Develop syllabi that lay out a course that connects the standards, assessments, and instruction. That would be kind of cool, the third thing would be, because you would be able to, you could give a high school mathematics teacher or a high school social studies teacher you could give them a syllabus on how you're going to teach this course, and you would have the objectives aligned not with the state standards, but with the Common Core standards, and they would be aligned with the assessments that we would be giving them as well. So instead of having one state test, you could have multiple assessment systems that could be shared with the teachers. C, new intermediaries for validation and item bank development, meaning help build better tests. Develop specifications for new technology-based instructional platforms that would help states deliver high-quality assessments aligned to the Common Core standards. Develop new scoring technology and new forms of diagnostic assessments, and explore how to support student academic success, build their academic tenacity, and surround them with responsive education environments. So by fixing, this is really a curriculum change. It's a curriculum change that will ultimately change the assessment system and make it a better educational experience for all the students. The Common Core is broadly written, so the partners are analyzing the knowledge and skills underneath them. Talks about what to expect in literacy, outline literacy model, pilot testing, going to scale. So that is what the Common Core is moving towards. And now let's look at the history of the Common Core as it. I love social studies and I really love history. So I'm okay with Common Core. I'm okay with No Child Left Behind. But I also like to know, where did the history come from on this, and what are we looking at when we see, what brought this about. So let's make sure we leave this lecture with a better understanding of the historical significance of the Common Core. This is a 99-page article, which is unbelievable, because what this Michael Watt does is he actually, this is copyright Michael Watt, and the Common Core Standards Initiative and Overview. He actually creates kind of a historical record of the Common Core standards in 2011, and just pretty much says this is what the Common Core standards is and this is where it came from. So it does a really amazing thing. We won't have time to read all 99 pages, and I don't really expect you to. He taught several secondary schools in Tasmania and has worked as an education officer in the Tasmanian Department of Education. He holds master's degrees in educational studies and education from the University of Tasmania and a doctorate in education from the University of Canberra. He currently works as an educational consultant. So we can make a guess on this. Why would Michael write a paper on this? Maybe he is setting the tone as, hey, I'm the expert on this. And after reading this, Mr. Watt is very much the expert on Common Core standards, I feel. He talks about the Common Core standards, and he gets into a very key point. And let's look at the history of it. Let me find where we're talking about. He says the movement for educational reform was an outcome of the public debate on social, economic, and political issues. We've always had a need to have educational reform. If you think back to Reagan's presidency, Ronald Reagan, okay, I'll go ahead and say it. Ronald Reagan was a great president. And if you wish to disagree, that's fine. I've always didn't know what to think about with Reagan, but Reagan was really a good guy. I really like his presidency. I like how he handled several things. But Reagan was a really strong believer that education should be the state's responsibility. he wanted to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education. He felt that federalizing public education was not a good idea. Now, and that does not mean that he wanted us to go back to the one-room schoolhouse. He just felt that, the federal government could give the states money and everything, which is fine, but that the states really should control their own education systems. And he really was a big thing on that. However, Reagan could not stop reports. Reagan could not stop reports that would come out, such as Nation at Risk. These reports would come out and they would say, America's lagging behind. So Reagan had to do something about that. So he would say, okay, we're going to need to create a commission or anything. But why am I talking about Reagan? There's not much education, federal reforms in the 80s because Reagan just felt that there wasn't a need for federal interventions in public education. Many of y'all may side with this. I kind of agree with it. I agree that the federal government, that's a big pill to swallow, is to say we're going to federalize education and we're going to tell the states how they should educate their students. It's a big, and it's also very financially demanding, very financially demanding. And Reagan didn't want to go down that path. He thought that he would encourage states and businesses, and that's how it worked. But these reform movement just kept pushing. And as Reagan was president, a lot of these reports would come out, and Reagan would just say, yes, we need to look at it, but that was it. But it was kind of brewing underneath the surface. Governors wanted to do something, and people wanted to a lot of politicians wanted to really throw a lot of money at these education problems that they perceived. Generally, the reports of these studies were critical of the poor quality of public education. So these reports kept coming out. The National Commission on the Excellence in Education sent one out in 1983. Two ways of reforms during the 1980s, effective improvements through small-scale school reform projects. A multiplicity of trends in the American education concurred in the early 90s. So you don't really see much federal reforms in the 80s. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, I was a product of the school system of the 80s and early 90s, and I think I thought the school systems were pretty good. However, we're now seeing that from the consensus, the definition of national standards based on academic disciplines issued from the National Education Goals, expounded following the Charlottesville Educational Summit convened by President George H.W. Bush in September 1989. So, where was the birth of the national standards movement? And there's the answer right there. George H.W. Bush in Charlotte convened an national educational goals in Charlottesville Educational Summit in 1989. You may ask why the vice president of Ronald Reagan, who became the president, George H.W. Bush, would convene that. I don't know, and I don't really want to speculate. But I will say that every president wants to put his stamp on certain areas, such as foreign policy, such as education, domestic crime, and drugs, combating war on drugs. And, Ronald Reagan, his policy against drugs was just say no, and they did that with Nancy Reagan. And then his policy against education was it was the state's job. His policy on foreign policy was let's beat the Russians, let's outspend them and bankrupt them, which he did. And then, so when the vice president becomes the president, when George Bush becomes the president, he definitely wanted his stamp on education being more towards a federal presence. So he convened the national summit in Charlottesville, and he asked them to come together and create. And from that they said, look, we need to have better standards. The Goals 2000 Education America Act, passed by the Clinton administration in March 1994, required the states to use the national standards as blueprints to develop and align state standards to state assessments. So it's not just Bush as well. Clinton comes in here. Now, many of y'all might say, what's up with that? What's going on with Bush and Clinton arguing for education. And one reason is, if you look at the politics of the time, a lot of under Reagan, there's this organization called the National Governors Alliance. The National Governor Alliance is where governors get together, the association where they all get together and they meet and they talk about how we can encourage the federal government to help us as states. During Reagan and under Bush, the first Bush, a lot of these governors would meet, and those governors were like the governors of Arkansas and Texas and Florida, which, of course, was Bush and Clinton. So a lot of these governors start really popping up, and so these later presidents like Clinton in Arkansas and like Bush in Texas were at these governors associations when they were saying, we need standards. So you'll see that later on. The Goals 2000 Educate American Act passed by the administration required the states to use national standards as blueprints to develop and align state standards to state assessments. Beginning in July 1994, state education agencies applied to the U.S. Department of Education for Goals 2000 grants. So state agencies could then apply for grants and get federal money under Title III to develop comprehensive educational improvement plans, which included establishing challenging state standards. So, we now see a key element of the federal government's movement to state standards and to national standards, and that is the power of the purse. The federal government can ask states to do stuff by giving them grants. We will give you X amount of money if you create stronger standards. So where did the Common Core movement emerge from? It emerged from the summit in Charlottesville, but then it was also reinforced by Goals 2000 grants, which encouraged people to create stronger standards. The U.S. Department of Education for Goals 2000 grants under Title III to develop and implement comprehensive education and improvement plans. The Improving American School Act, passed by the Clinton administration in October of 1994, required each state to develop state content and performance standards for mathematics and reading, and state assessments aligned to these standards. Enhancement of the No Child Left Behind Act by President George W. Bush in December 2001 led to new regulations being issued in November of 2002. These regulations required each state to measure students' progress in reading and mathematics in each grade 3 through 8, and at least once during grades 10 through 12. By 2007-2008, states were required to administer assessments in science at least once each in grades 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and 10 through 12. We know this because that's what No Child Left Behind is based on, assessments. At the beginning of 2003, each state was required to establish a definition of adequate yearly progress based on a set of criteria to use each year to determine the achievement of each district and school. In defining AYP, states set the minimum levels of improvement that districts and schools must achieve. Each state began by setting a starting point, and that is based on the performance of the lowest achieving demographic group. The state, we all know about this. This is No Child Left Behind. Subsequent thresholds must increase at least once every 3 years until the end of 12 years. All students in the state are achieving at the proficient level in state assessments for reading, language, arts, and math. So now that's an overview of No Child Left Behind. So in 12 years, by 2014, all students in every school should be passing a proficient level. The regulations of the No Child Left Behind Act, permitting states to set levels of student achievement, increased the variation in what states demanded of students. So the demands got more. Contending that the No Child Left Behind Act created incentives for states to manipulate the law by lowering standards, both conservative and progressive policymakers advocated the development of national standards and assessments. So, where did the Common Core national standards movement really take place? It is the notion of cheating. That's right. we were concerned, the federal government was concerned that states would just lower their standards and thus allow their students to pass the state test. So by tying No Child Left Behind into national standards, you cannot allow a state to lower their standards. So Common Core will spin out of this. The effects of global economic competition, poor student performances, makes this a very big thing. But, okay. So Common Core really takes off with the concern that states would just lower their standards to make AYP. In 2001, a private nonprofit called Achieve, along with the Education Trust and the Thomas B. Forbin Foundation, as well as the National Alliance of Business, launched what became known as the American Diploma Project to help states prepare students for college. Now, we need to take a pause here and make sure we understand where this is coming from. Why would a national nonprofit as Achieve decide to take and do this America Diploma Project? The simple answer is grants. By receiving federal money to do these grants and these studies, then they could function as a nonprofit. So let's go a step further. Why would the federal government release a grant, millions of dollars in grant money, for private organizations to study national standards? And we know the answer to that. If they could get these private organizations to do research that advocated national standards, then they could show that the states that they had to have national standards. So, this is kind of a smoke and mirror. The federal government is wanting the states to do national standards. They are. We all agree that we need Common Core national standards because the states would just change the standards so they could do AYP. But instead of the federal government saying, okay, everyone, you have to do national standards, the federal government is going to get the researchers and private organizations to say, hey, y'all, we need to have national standards. We've done these studies. You know, they may whisper, we've done these studies funded by a federal government. However, no one really cares about that. We've done these studies that say that we need to have national standards. And then the states go, yeah, that's a good idea. And the federal government goes, okay. It's kind of an underhanded way or kind of a sneaky way to get the states to do what the federal government wants them to do by tying it into private research. Very smart, very smart. The American Diploma Project ended up concluding that by Achieve in 2008 reported a study of the standards revision process. But what ends up happening is the American Diploma Project pretty much concludes that, hey, everyone, we have national standards so our students can be ready to compete on the international level. Achieve then takes those reports and those findings and they take them around and they really start, they present to the federal government. They say, you know, we agree that there needs to be national standards. The federal government, along with other private organizations, agree with this, mainly because they're receiving some federal money as well, and they start lobbying states to do state standards that become national standards. One of the first places they stop is the National Governors Association. The National Governors Association is what it is. It's all 50 governors, and they meet on monthly or yearly basis, and they talk about what they need to do. The National Governors Association, as well as the Council of Chief State School Officers, state superintendents, and Achieve all get together and agree that there needs to be national standards. And they start appointing commissions. By the end, all these organizations agree that there needs to be national standards. So this made the birth of what becomes known as the Common Core standards. So, Common Core standards are really connected to No Child Left Behind. They had their birth in Charlottesville, the accountability movement has its birth with No Child Left Behind. But they kind of come together like a perfect storm when they say, look, y'all, we all need to have adequate yearly progress, but then then the federal government says, well, we're going to have standards because everyone's just going to lower their standards to make sure they meet AYP. So the federal government starts throwing out grant money to do research on national standards, and everyone starts saying that's a good idea, and then everyone says, let's do that. It's kind of like wanting your kid to brush his teeth. So what you would do is you would say, instead of saying you must brush your teeth, you would say you would go brush your teeth. And your kid sees you brushing their teeth, and you make it fun. And then one day you say, hey, hey, Billy, won't you smile in the mirror? Look how pretty your teeth are. You want to keep those pretty, don't you? And they go, yeah. And then you say, hey, and you kind of embed into your kid that brushing your teeth is fun and productive. And then all of a sudden your kid says, I want to brush my teeth, Mama. I want to brush my teeth. That's kind of what the federal government did. They threw enough money out there, and they said, look, y'all, do research on national standards. And everyone says, national standards is a good idea. We want to do them. Help us do them. And the federal government says, here's some money, let's do them. See, the federal government made the states jump on board with this. Are the national standards, common core standards, a bad thing? No, but now you see the political maneuvering with this. Now, one of the last things we want to talk about is the idea known as race for the top. So let's make sure we understand this. George W. Bush leaves the White House in 2008. Or actually, I think January 2009. So he leaves the White House, and President Obama takes over. Now, there's no research behind this, but this is the political maneuvering of it. So they probably asked President Obama, what do you want to do about education? Now, you now have a better understanding of what Obama had to face. If he says, I'm going to get rid of No Child Left Behind, if he does that, he in essence gets rid of all the federal money that we have thrown at this, which has been very big ever since Goals 2000 under the Clinton administration. This is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So what President Obama says is, we really can't get rid of No Child Left Behind, and you see that we can't get rid of it. So he says, well, we really can't get rid of it because if we get rid of it, we get rid of the common core, which is something we've been working on for years. I go, okay. So he says, we can't get rid of that. See, so being president is not an easy job because President Obama, how would you fix it? If you get rid of No Child Left Behind, everyone will go, yeah, No Child Left Behind is gone. However, it goes back to just the states doing what they want to do under Reagan. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. It's up to you. But how do we handle that? Where do we put our money? So President Obama has announced, I think he announced this year, that we were going to, get rid of some things. We're going to do waivers for No Child Left Behind. But President Obama decides to do something that is kind of part of the formula, we'll say. He decides to create this grant program called Race to the Top. So that's one of the things I wrote down that we want to make sure we talk about because Race to the Top is connected to this. So this is the final icing of the cake on the presentation. The Race to the Top was a federal funded, I think it was billions of dollars. I believe it might have been $13 billion. It was a lot of money. But it was all the states could apply for this. And here were the rules. Every state had to change their curriculum towards the national standards movement and then submit to the federal government how they were going to make their standards even better. So they were going to race to the top. So all the states had to change their curriculum and then apply for the money. I think in the end, 10 states end up getting it, so they end up winning it. One state, Tennessee, got $500 million. Mississippi didn't win it. But you kind of see how it is. It's kind of like you've got 10 kids, and they say, your parents say, I'll give $10 to the person who cleans their room up the best. So everybody races and tries to clean up the room, and then so-and-so wins, so they give them $10. So what ended up happening was it cost $10 to clean 10 rooms. So that's kind of what the federal government does, is they say, okay, if you change your curriculum, you can apply for this national federal race to the top. So what was Race to the Top? Race to the Top was a grant that that schools could receive, states could receive, that would encourage them to change their curriculum towards national standards. And national standards are the Common Core movement, which is tied to No Child Left Behind. So hopefully now you see a better understanding of where this is coming from and what the Common Cores are. The last thing about this is, where does Mississippi stand? Mississippi has introduced the Common Core standards, and they said that they're going to introduce them on the elementary level and then work them up to the top. So now you see where it's coming from. Are the Common Core standards bad? No, they're not. They're really not. It's a good idea, I would imagine, but now you see the historical and the political maneuvering that created the Common Core standards. Your assignment for this is very simple, and I'll post it on the assignment tab. Pretend you are the president. What would you do in education? It's a real simple journal. If you want to cite some references, you can. You don't have to. But pretend you are elected president and you are the next president of the United States. What would you do? And explain to me why you would do that. Would you get rid of No Child Left Behind? And if you get rid of No Child Left Behind, then you're losing all that federal money. What would you focus on? Common Core and accountability? What would you do? You kind of see that being president is not the easiest job in the world, and that you definitely see that the president has to face, get rid of No Child Left Behind. Well, that would be a knee-jerk reaction. Or you could go back to the Reagan era and see how that works. Very easy lecture, and I hope you learned something from it. I've enjoyed teaching it to you, and I'll go ahead and put the assignment up now so you can finish that. I'll make it due in a week or so. But hopefully you enjoyed this lecture, and I enjoyed making it. So now let me go ahead and close everything up.